Hey guys, welcome to the 50 Projects 50 Days course. So this course is really meant for beginners or intermediate level web developers that want a cool, unique project to do every day. And these are just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There's no front-end frameworks used or anything like that. And they're really meant to sharpen your CSS skills, your JavaScript skills, and just working with the DOM in general. So I actually created this course with a friend of mine, Florin Pop. You might know him from Twitter or Twitch or YouTube, and he actually created all these projects. So I definitely want to give him credit for that. And as far as what you should know before taking this course, I would say just the very basics of those three technologies, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I mean, I'm not going to explain what a variable is or how to import a style sheet or anything like that, so you should know the very basics, but just about anyone can take this course. And there's 50 different projects. We might add more later. We might switch up some later, but like I said, they're really meant to sharpen your skills and just give you something fun to create. So if that sounds good, then let's go ahead and jump in and get started.
To survive now when I like in your heart survive now when I like in your heart.
All right, so before we jump into our projects, I just want to go over my environment and what I'll be using, and there's not much to talk about because this is just vanilla JavaScript and HTML and CSS, so there's no frameworks or anything like that. Basically, the text editor I'm using is VSCode, Visual Studio Code, and that's what I recommend. That it's really popular in the web dev community. I'm sure a lot of you, if not most of you, are already using it, but you don't have to. You can use Sublime Text or Atom or something like that, or some other IDE. That's absolutely fine. But if you want to follow along to a T with this course, then I would suggest using VSCode, which you can get from code.visualstudio.com. Now I just want to jump into VS Code real quick, and I just have my project starter, which we're actually going to create in the next video. But I want to talk a little bit about the extensions I'm using as well as Emmet. So Emmet is a tool that's pre-installed with VS Code. If you're using something like Atom or Sublime Text, you have to install Emmet as a plugin or an extension. And it just helps you write faster HTML. So if I want an H1, just H1 enter will give me my tags. If I want to add a class, I can do dot and then, my class, enter. If I want to do two classes, I could say my class 2, enter. If I want to do an ID, I can do number sign and say my ID. It gives me an H1 with an ID. If I want an ID and a class, I can do that. Okay, and if I'm using a div, I don't even need to, I can do div and then my class like that, but we don't even need to add the div. We can just do dot my class, enter, and it will automatically give us a div. Same with the ID. Okay, and if we wanted like 3 divs, we could say div and then times 3. That'll give us 3 divs. So that's about the extent that I'll be using Emmet to. I do have a complete crash course on YouTube on Emmet if you want to learn more about it. All right, now let's take a look at the extensions I'm using. So you don't need the only one I would really suggest is Live Server. That will allow you to open our project on a development server that will auto reload whenever we save either the HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. It'll auto reload so we don't have to keep clicking the reload button. Other than that, I'm using auto rename tag, which just renames the end HTML tag once you rename the beginning tag. Pretty self-explanatory. Bracket pair colorizer, it just colorizes your brackets, your parentheses, and curly braces. You can see these outer curly braces are purple, the inner ones are blue. If I had another set nested in the if, those would be a different color as well. And then I'm also using Prettier, which is a code formatter. As far as formatting your code, it's completely up to you. I like to use single quotes as opposed to double quotes in my JavaScript. I also don't use semicolons. And to set that stuff, you can just go to your settings with either command comma, or you can just click on the gear down here and go to settings. And if you search for Prettier, there's a bunch of options here for your code. I'm going to go down to this option here. You can see I have semi unchecked. I'm not using semicolons. I also have single quote checked, tab width of 2. So it's completely up to you on how you want to format your code. And I'm also using format on save. You can see that's checked. What that means is If something is wrong, it'll fix it when I save. So for instance, even in the HTML, if I'm like over here and I save, it goes back into place. If I go into my JavaScript and I create a variable here, like const x equals double quote, we'll just say test and put a semicolon. If I save, it formats it to the way that I specified, which is no semicolons and single quotes. All right, so I'm just going to get rid of that, and that's it. I mean, pretty simple stuff. You can, of course, use whatever text editor you want, whatever settings you want. I just wanted to show you what I'm working with. All right, so in the next video, we're going to start to create this little project starter, which we're going to use as a boilerplate for all of our projects in this course. Okay, so I just want to create a project starter, basically a boilerplate that we can use in all the following projects. So we don't have to keep recreating files and so on. You can just duplicate this folder and rename it. So I called it underscore project underscore starter underscore, and the reason for the underscores is just because it's not an actual project, it's just the boilerplate. So this is completely empty, there's nothing in it, and I'm going to open this with VS Code. If you're on Windows, you can right click and say open with code. If you're on a Mac, you can drag it down to your VS Code icon and it should open. And you can see it's completely empty, so I'm going to create 3 files. Index.html is the first one. Then we want our style sheet, which I'm going to call style.css. And then we want our JavaScript file, which I'm going to call script.js. So these are the 3 main files that we're going to use in all of these projects. Now in the HTML, I'm going to go ahead and use Emmet and do exclamation enter, and that's going to give me just a boilerplate of an HTML page with the HTML5 doctype, head, body tags, and so on. And I'm just going to go ahead and tab down to the title here and say my project, and we can change this for every project. And then in the body, we'll just have an H1 and we'll say project starter. Okay, now to open this, I'm going to save this. Now to open it, you could go to the actual file, like, you know, go here and open index.html, but we're going to be using live server. So what we want to do is just right click and say open with live server. And you can see that it's open on my local host, my loopback address, which is 127.0.0.1 and port 5500. So I'm just going to make this smaller. And we want to make sure that we include our style sheet here and our JavaScript. So I'm just going to close the sidebar up, and let's add here, we'll say link enter. And for the href, we want to link to our style sheet. And we want to link to the JavaScript down here right above the ending body tag. We'll say script:/src, and the source for this JavaScript is going to be script.js. Okay, so now both of those should be included. And that's pretty much all I want to have for the starting HTML. Now, one thing I want to mention is in some projects we'll be using Font Awesome, so you have to include the Font Awesome style sheet. And there's a couple ways to do that. So the first is to actually go to fontawesome.com, and you can put your email address in here and say send kit code, and it'll give you a link to the Font Awesome CSS. Now, we're not going to do that. What I usually do is go to cdnjs.com and just search for Font Awesome, and you can just simply grab the link right here. So this is the CSS that you need. You can copy the link tag and you can put that right above your link to your style sheet, and then we can use Font Awesome. So some projects I might start off with this link already here. If you want, you can keep it here, just comment it out, and then on projects where we use it, you can uncomment it, whatever you want. But I'm just going to go ahead and leave it out. I just wanted to mention that. Now for our style sheet, I do want to start with a default font. I want to start with the Roboto font. So I'm going to go ahead and just go to Google Fonts real quick. And I have it up here in a shortcut. And Roboto is right here. If you don't see it, you can search for it. And you can use a different font if you'd like, but I'm going to use Roboto regular 400. So I'll say select the style, and then bold 700, select the style. And over here, you can either use a link in your HTML or an import in your CSS. So I'm going to use the import. I'm going to copy this. I don't need the style tags, just the import. and then we'll go back into our style sheet and just paste that in there. That way we can use that font. All right, so we can close this up and let's apply that to the body. So we'll say font dash family and set that to Roboto sans serif. So if I save that, notice that it auto reloads. It's because we're using live server. And I know a lot of you guys probably already know all of this stuff, but I want to make sure that I'm clear because I know that there are beginners taking this course. All right, now I also want to set on the universal selector, so an asterisk here. This just means we want to apply this to everything. I want to apply a box sizing property. This is something I do in just about every project where I use CSS. We want to set it to border box so that if we add any padding or any border onto an element, it doesn't actually affect the width of it. So I add this on just about everything I do. And then in the body here, I'm actually going to get rid of the margin. So let's say margin 0. The space you see here is from the actual H1. And I'm also going to display flex. And the reason for this is because I want to center everything, because a lot of most of the projects are going to be something that's right in the middle of the viewport. So I'm going to display flex, and just to talk a little bit about Flexbox, for those of you that haven't used it, I'm going to put 2 more elements in here. It could be anything, but I'm just going to put some H2s. And just setting it to display flex, it's going to put it in a row. You can see how everything I put in the body now goes this way, goes horizontal. I don't actually want that. I want it to go back vertical, but still be a flex box. So we can set the flex direction to column. If I save that, now you can see it goes back vertical. Now, since it's a flex box, I can go ahead and use align items, and I want to align items center. Now, if your flex box is a column like this is, then align items is going to pertain to aligning it horizontally. If it's a row, it would pertain to vertical. All right, so we centered it horizontally. I also want to center it vertical. I want it to be right in the middle. So for that, we can add justify content and set it to center. Now, notice how it didn't move to the center here vertically, and that's because the body doesn't have a height on it. Okay, we need our flex box to have a height, so let's set a we'll just set height to 100 VH, which is a viewport height, and that means take up the entire height of the browser, the viewport. So I'm going to save, and now you can see it's centered both ways. Okay, and then the last thing I want to add here is just an overflow, and I'm going to set it to hidden because I don't want scroll bars to be shown by default. And that's it. So I'll just get rid of these 2 H2s and just keep the H1 there. Okay, so that's pretty much it. No JavaScript because that's varies, very differently per project. I just wanted to add some basic styling to kind of move everything to the middle, add a font, also link in our style sheet and JavaScript because we don't want to do that in every single project. So from now on, you can just simply copy or duplicate this folder, and we can go ahead and get right into the project. Now, if you want to stop live server, you see this little port 5500. You can click that, or you can right click and you can say stop live server, and now it's going to stop serving on localhost 5500. Okay, so that's going to be pretty much the workflow. We'll go ahead and use this boilerplate here, the project starter, and we'll use live server to run it, and then we'll go ahead and create our projects.
Living life, every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days. Fuck me, I'm looking in the mirror, so foggy, but I've never seen clearer.